Welcome! Today we're doing a deep dive into just 4 letters from the Qur'an: Alif, Lam, Mim, Sad. They show up right at the start of the 7th chapter, but they don't actually form a word. So what are they doing there? Well, the source material for this analysis offers a really fascinating, profound theory, and we're going to break it down, piece by piece, to see what secrets these letters might just hold.
All right, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to tackle the central puzzle. What's the deal with these letters? Then we'll connect them to this powerful, almost mystical concept, God's greatest name, and see how that idea completely transforms the very nature of prayer. We'll also dig into why some prayers are thought to be answered, while others aren't, before finally getting into a forensic breakdown of each individual letter to see what it could represent.
So right from the get-go, this chapter of the Quran presents us with a challenge, a puzzle that has really captured the minds of scholars for centuries. It's a linguistic mystery for sure, but as we're about to see, it's also a deeply spiritual one.
Now, the source text that we're examining today, it grounds its entire argument right here, in this one passage. Everything we're about to unpack, the intricate theology, the theories about divine power, it all flows from the interpretation of this specific verse. The verse kicks off with those 4 letters: Alif, Lam, Mim, Sad. And they're not pronounced as a word, they're recited individually. They just sit there at the beginning, almost like a code, demanding that you stop and think, signaling that what's coming next isn't just ordinary language.
So there's actually a name for these kinds of letters in Islamic theology. They're called the huruf muqatta'at, and their appearance at the start of almost 30 different chapters has made them one of the most profound and hotly debated topics in Quranic studies. You can think of them as a divine signature, a mystery, and maybe even a key, all rolled into one.
And that, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question that our source text is trying to answer. What is the point of these letters? What are they meant to signify? Are they some kind of abbreviation? A mystical symbol? A divine challenge? This is really the heart of our entire investigation.
Okay, so here's where the theory gets really powerful. The source text proposes that these letters are anything but random. The belief is that they are the fundamental components of what's known in Islamic tradition as God's greatest name. Our source connects these letters directly to this concept of the Ism al-Azam. So the idea isn't just that they're letters, it's that they are the literal building blocks of this name. And this isn't just some fancy title, it's believed to be a key to divine reality itself, a name so powerful that any prayer made using it is, quite literally, guaranteed to be answered.
Now, the source is really clear on this point. This isn't magic. It's not a spell. The power of this name comes from the idea that it embodies divine attributes. Think of it this way. The name Al-Rahman, the most merciful, is seen as a direct channel for the reality of mercy to flow into the world. So this greatest name is seen as a channel for the totality of God's power, something capable of influencing the very fabric of existence.
And this idea completely reframes the whole act of prayer, or dua. According to our source, prayer stops being just about asking for something. It becomes the act of invoking and channeling the actual divine attributes that are contained within God's names.
And this leads to a really fascinating, almost mind-bending shift in perspective. The source suggests that for someone who has reached a certain spiritual state, prayer isn't just a person calling out to God anymore. It's actually God calling upon himself through that person. The individual effectively becomes a vessel for a divine act.
To really get this, our source gives us a framework. It splits God's names into 2 types. You have the Malakuti names, which relate to the heavenly, abstract, angelic realm. And then you have the Mulki names, for the earthly, physical world of action and dominion. Now, here's the crucial part. The greatest name, the Ism al-Azam, is believed to be the bridge between them. It encompasses and integrates both of those realms, connecting heaven and earth.
But of course, there's a catch. Accessing this kind of power isn't like flipping a switch. Our source text is very clear that it all hinges on the spiritual state, the inner reality of the person who is praying.
And the source document really goes into granular detail on this. It meticulously lays out how different spiritual ranks determine how effective a person's connection, and therefore their prayer, can possibly be. It's not about the words you say, it's about the state from which you are saying them.
The text lays out a very clear path. First, a person reaches a high spiritual rank. From that station, their own will begins to align with the divine will. So when they pray, it's no longer a request coming from a great distance, it's an expression coming from a state of nearness, a prayer that is already in harmony with divine purpose.
And to categorize these different states, the source uses specific Quranic terms. At the very top, in this context, you have al-muflihun, the successful ones. These are the people who have achieved such a proximity to God that their prayers are just inherently answered. And in contrast, you have the fasiqin and zalimin, those who are veiled or distant from God, and whose connection is therefore blocked.
So this is the absolute crucial point. For those who reach the station of the muflihun, the whole act of prayer is transformed. It's no longer a petition that you send up to some distant king. Instead, it becomes a conversation that happens within a state of unity, an articulation of a will that is already aligned with the divine. All right, so now we circle all the way back to the letters themselves: Aleph, Lam, Mim, Sad. Now that we have this new understanding of the greatest name in these spiritual ranks, we can see them in a totally new light, as the basic building blocks of divine communication and as a direct challenge to all of humanity. The source highlights a really profound point here, and it's one that's easy to miss. The miracle of the Quran isn't built from some kind of alien celestial alphabet. No, it's constructed from the very same 28 letters that people at the time used for poetry, for business, for writing a letter. And this, of course, leads to the fundamental theological question that gets right to the heart of the Quran's claim of divinity. If the raw materials are right there for everyone to use, if they're universally understood, then why has no one, in over 1,400 years, been able to produce even a single chapter that can rival its eloquence, its wisdom, and its power? This whole idea is central to the concept of ijaz, the miraculous, inimitable nature of the Quran. And this brings us right back to our disjointed letters. By placing them right at the start of the chapter, the text is, in a way, throwing down a gauntlet. It's basically saying, here are the building blocks, the same letters you use every day. Go ahead, try to make something like this.
So, with all that context, let's finally get into the forensic analysis of the letters themselves. Our source text meticulously goes through each one, Aleph, Lam, Mim, and Sad, to unpack its potential symbolism, treating every single letter like a clue.
And this detailed breakdown comes directly from our source material. The text doesn't treat these as just sounds. It treats each letter as a key, a pointer to a much deeper divine concept or a divine attribute. Okay, let's start with the first letter, Alif. According to the analysis in our source, the Alif is a direct pointer to God himself. It could stand for the name Allah, or it might be the first letter of that incredibly powerful statement, Ana Allah, which means I am God. And a third interpretation connects it to Allah, which means the bounties of God. But you see, in every single case, it establishes divine presence right from the very start. Next, we have Lam. Following that same logic, Lam is seen as a pointer to key divine attributes. It could point to the name Al-Latif, meaning the subtle, or maybe Al-Alim, the all-knowing. It could also be that crucial first letter in the central creed of Islam, La ilaha illa ana, there is no God but I. All of these point directly to God's uniqueness and his infinite knowledge.
The third letter, Mim, points powerfully toward the concept of divine authority and sovereignty. So it's interpreted as representing Al-Malik, the king, or Al-Majid, the glorious. Or even more broadly, it can point to God's mulk, his absolute, undeniable kingship over everything in creation.
And finally, we get to the letter Sad. The source interprets this as a pointer to the divine name Al-Sadiq, meaning the truthful. Now, what's really interesting here is the presence of Sad itself. It makes this particular combination of letters unique. It's different from the more common Aleph Lam Mim that we see in other chapters. Its presence here seems to signal a message of truthfulness that is specific to the themes of this very surah.
So, when you put all of these pieces together, you realize these are not just disjointed letters at all. According to this interpretation, they can actually form a profound, cohesive declaration of divine identity. One possible reading is a full sentence: I am God, the all-knowing, the king, the truthful. These letters act like a thematic key, unlocking the core message of the entire chapter that's about to unfold. And that brings us back full circle to the central thesis of our source material. These letters are anything but arbitrary placeholders. No, they are presented as the very building blocks of the Ism al-Azam, of God's greatest name. And to understand them is to begin to understand the very nature of divine communication and of reality itself. So we're left with this final provocative thought. If just 4 simple letters can unlock this much meaning, connecting language, faith, and the very nature of reality,
What else is hidden just beneath the surface of the text, waiting for us to discover?